Discover over 100 episodes of Bartholomew Town on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The ridership has decayed as the service has decayed, and it's not even that shocking.
So we've spent a decent amount of time talking about public transportation here in Rhode Island. Certainly when I had RIPTA, Rhode Island Public Transit Authority CEO, Scott Avedizian on. I also wrote an article for the Avenue Concept magazine on the Move RI program, which put murals on a couple of buses here in Rhode Island. And I certainly reference public transit often when I'm kind of describing some of the pillars for what, in my mind anyway, would be required for moving Rhode Island into the future. But here's an angle that is imperative to the entire conversation. Someone who actually rides the bus every day. And that's exactly what Tom Sgoras is. So on this episode of the Bartholomew Town Podcast, we are going to hear from someone who literally rides the bus every day and has also thought about the issue of public transit and many other critical Rhode Island issues for quite some time. By the way, it's Bill Bartholomew here with you for another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. Always a pleasure to spend some time together with you, podcasting from my studio here in the beautiful Elmwood section of Providence, Rhode Island. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Listen on your preferred app or ripodcast.com or bartholomewtown.com. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Twinkling lights, fragrant wintergreens, beautiful bows, and a most amazing Christmas tree on historic Bowen's Wharf in Newport. Come out early on Saturday, December 7th for holiday shopping and other activities and stay through the evening as festivities begin with Frosty the Snowman at 4:30 p.m. Local musicians will take to the stage at 5 to lead a carol sing-along, and a city official will light the tree at 6 o'clock. It's the official beginning of Christmas at historic Bowen's Wharf in Newport, Saturday, December 7th. As always, a great way that you can support the pod is to subscribe, rate, and review on your preferred pod app. And you can always find the new episodes posted at ripodcast.com or bartholomewtown.com. And I'm excited to announce we've got a couple things coming up, kind of year-end wrap type things. One, we're going to do a roundtable discussion with some local celebs, dare I say. Well, depending on who you value as a celebrity, I suppose. But certainly in my world, sort of the biggest news stories in Rhode Island and sort of how it all played out, at least through the year, in terms of the biggest news stories of 2019. So that's one episode. And then I'm also going to have a couple of episodes, maybe even 3, because I'm not finished yet. I don't know how much I'm going to elaborate on this. The top 19 episodes of the Bartholomew Town Podcast in 2019. And I'd love to have your input. No, I obviously have your input to a certain extent. I can see how many episodes were listened, particular episode, how often it was listened to, and so on and so forth, and sort of use my own judgment call about talk about town, social media shares, retweets, things like that. I can kind of get some numbers on it. I have a sort of a feel in my mind of how the list looks, but I'd love to hear from you. Bill at ripodcast.com. You can tweet at me at Bill Bartholomew, and you can follow the pod on Instagram for daily content. Send me a DM at Bartholomew Town Podcast. Okay, let's get to it. Our conversation on public transit in Rhode Island with someone who rides the bus every day, Tom Sgoras. All right, so we are here today. We're going to zoom into a specific topic that is a part of Rhode Island's future when we talk about building the state out for the next 20, 25 years. A goal that often, from different sources I hear, is move the state towards better public transportation, better transportation infrastructure. You know, the reality of today is that RIPTA, it is stretched in terms of its budget, and off air we were kind of discussing the funding mechanisms behind RIPTA in terms of a fixed price of gas and how that affects ridership, and in times ridership can be increased because of a motivation to ride the bus because of an increase in the cost of gas, but then that doesn't necessarily translate into greater revenue for RIPTA. So I think let's start there, kind of looking at the basics. We have a bus system here that doesn't necessarily work for most people, and it has become sort of stigmatized as something used by quote-unquote poor people or something like that.
Yeah,
it's been that way for a long time. But to think about an example that you just mentioned, I think it was 2004, there was a dramatic run up in gas prices. They went from $2 a gallon to almost to $4, sometimes up to $5 a gallon. And in short order, RIPTA got a surge of riders. But at the same time, because RIPTA's funding came through a few pennies per gallon on the gas tax, not a percentage of the amount you spend, but the percentage of a piece of the number of gallons you buy. At the same time that the ridership surged, the revenue went way down, and that put RIPTA into a budget hole. And I think it's fair to say that it hasn't really come out of that hole. I mean, at that moment, there was a bunch of planning efforts going on at RIPTA to kind of remake some of the routes and make them serve better, make them and make better service out of them, and that stopped all of a sudden, and that's why you have the situation today where the quality of the service kind of really depends on where you live. If you live in the East Bay, somewhere between Providence and Newport, the 60 bus. There's more than 50 buses a day that go between Providence and Newport. The service there is good enough that you can just go out and stand and wait for the bus. You don't have to check for the schedule. But in the West Bay, the buses are not even on the hour, and that really is because the planning effort came to a grinding halt at that point, and that's kind of the way things are now. I mean, it is, as you said, it's a system that the people who planned for it sort of think of it as a system for poor people, and it kind of, as a result, it becomes a very poor system. I think one of the fundamental problems is that almost nobody who is actually making decisions for the system rides it. The governor doesn't ride it. The RIDOT director doesn't ride it. Joe Paolino, who's making plans for Kennedy Plaza, he certainly doesn't ride it. But I think what people don't realize is that RIPTA management mostly doesn't ride it. The RIPTA board, there's nobody on the RIPTA board who rides it except for the person who's there to represent the disabled. And that's kind of crazy too, because there actually is a state law that says that somebody on the RIPTA board's got to be a regular rider, but the governor has decided that that's I don't know, it's an optional thing, or maybe.
Really, it's almost to give that piece of feedback, sort of like with the schools where parents and students want to have a seat at the table. Riders want to have a seat formally at the table and are entitled to by law, you're saying.
Right. I mean, you want to be in the room where decisions are being made, not participating in these kind of lame public information sessions that are always sort of there to tell you what has already been decided.
Right.
The system evolves without the input from anybody who actually rides it, which is, if you think about it, kind of nuts.
Yeah, it should be more of a user-generated system, if anything. And that would also allow maybe to think of how to build hubs, how to really design routes that are efficient, and also how to make the system more pleasant to be on. I know there's some efforts with art and poetry in motion, sort of borrowing from the city, and they're going to put pollinators on top of the buses. So there's all these kind of programs. I wrote an article on the Move RI bus, which I think you may have ridden on over here because it pulled off seconds before you got in here. It's the painted.
No, but I did come up on an electric bus.
Oh, did you? Okay, so there's some efforts,
which was kind of exciting.
Yeah,
I mean, RIPTA can't stand still. Stuff changes. They pay attention. They do what they do what they can with the resources they have. Actually, I wrote a report about RIPTA for the Sierra Club maybe 10 or 12 years ago now, where I compared them to a bunch of other transit systems around the country. And the truth is that they actually do pretty well, or at the time they did pretty well in terms of efficiency, in terms of the dollars spent per number of people and miles traveled. They actually did pretty well. The problem is that that's efficiency in terms of the dollars put in. That doesn't mean that it's efficient in terms of, like, my experience as a rider,
Right.
where where the system has just seen a slow decay over years. The line that I ride, 20 years ago when I got on the bus in. By the time the bus rolled into Providence, there were maybe 25 to 30 people on it. There was a line. The last stop before it became an express bus into Providence typically had a line of 12 or 15 people waiting to get on it. And since that time, I guess maybe that's 25 years ago, but since that time, the ridership has decayed as the service has decayed, and it's not even that shocking. I mean, there was a time when they canceled one of the return buses home, so that the buses going in were full, but then coming home you couldn't get a seat, and shockingly, that only lasted about 6 months before everybody found another way to commute where they could actually sit down on the way home. And I mean, that kind of short-sighted planning has just been the story over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, it's bad. It's in that sense, the short-sighted planning. I lived in Newport. I lived in New York for a decade, so was able to get rid of my vehicle. Was able to just go to a place where the anxiety of not parallel parking, but parking in general, trying to find a parking spot, all these things that were like actually causing deterioration of my quality of life at a micro level, but nonetheless it was there. I was getting rid of those. And then back here in Rhode Island, we found it, my wife and I, we have one vehicle between the two of us, but even so, it's very difficult to navigate the state, go from Newport to Providence and back in a day. By bus, even by ferry, all these methods, they're not the same. Yeah. They're not enticing to from a time perspective.
Exactly. They're not convenient.
Not convenient.
And
they're basically
they're not efficient. And the crazy part about this too is that, I mean, we are in the middle of a climate emergency, right? I mean, we had millions of people in streets around the world and thousands of people in the streets here in Rhode Island demanding action about greenhouse gases. And so, the transportation sector is responsible for almost a third of the greenhouse gases, and cars and trucks are about more than 80% of that. And so, we're not going to make any progress on greenhouse gases without somehow addressing the just vehicle miles traveled. And so, what is the state actually doing about that? As far as I can see, pretty much nothing. We are, there's, no, that's not at all fair. There are meetings, there are committees, there's planning, and there's more meetings, and there's, and there's workshops. Yep, some good workshops I've seen. And but that's the story. That the state's policy response to this climate emergency is completely missing. I mean, we have. When you look at the Department of Transportation and RIPTA, what do we have? We're planning to widen Route 95. We're planning to improve Route 10 so you can go faster on it. We might maybe do some pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, but if there's some money left over, we might get to that. And
sometime in the next 10 years is the kind of latest on that, right?
Maybe. I mean, if there's a little bit left over, and now we see this plan to make all the buses less convenient, to move the bus hub out of Kennedy Plaza and somehow distribute. This is the part that I think is really funny. To distribute a hub among 4 or 5 different locations. Now, a hub is not something that can be distributed around 4 or 5 locations. I mean, a hub is the center of a wheel, right? There's one thing. You don't have 4 hubs. They're not hubs if you distribute them around 4 or 5 different places. And so, but what's going to happen to me, for example, is that I'm going to take my bus in from the south. It's going to come up come up into Providence, and then in order to transfer to get to where I need to go in Providence, I'm going to have to walk, 6-10 blocks to find a connection.
Yeah.
And that's just silly. I mean, it's just not. It is not a feasible way to plan a commute. It is not even a convenient way to get around. It's as if the planners are thinking what will repel people from the buses most. I mean, as a result of these changes, my commute is going to be longer. I'm going to get colder. I'm going to get wetter. And in service of what? As far as we can tell, it's in service of some largely cosmetic changes in Kennedy Plaza that are going to be there to placate a large landlord. And like, it's not to say that Kennedy Plaza doesn't have its troubles. I mean, Kennedy Plaza is, it's a statewide facility, right? It's the whole state is using Kennedy Plaza as a bus hub, but the whole state is also relying on the city of Providence to pay for policing it and keeping it clean. And that seems sort of fundamentally unfair to Providence, but it also predictably doesn't get done in the best possible way. And so the plaza is not the not the most welcoming and attractive place it could be.
The beacon of the welcoming beacon to Rhode Island. I'm with you. I think the players. You look at the mayor's office. I wonder what a meeting of the Mayor Lorza, former Mayor Paolino, CEO of RIPTA, Scott Avedisian. I wonder or a group text message. I use that analogy a lot. Who's on what page in that broad conversation about how to move this area forward? How much of the changes in public transit are actually just a result of a breakdown in terms of our management of those who have mental illness challenges, who have other challenges that end up using Kennedy Plaza as their personal hub? I think that's another huge factor.
I mean, I think that's worth exploring for a minute.
Yeah.
There is this assumption somehow that there's a cause and effect relationship between RIPTA ending its service at the bus hub, at Kennedy Plaza, and the number of people in Kennedy Plaza who are there for for selling drugs or for hanging out or for whatever. I don't know why people imagine that eliminating buses from the central plaza of the city will also eliminate those people.
Right.
Do you think that they all just take the bus to get there, and that's their? The people are there. The people who are there, and the problems that we have there are problems that affect every large open public space in every city in the country. I wouldn't say that Rhode Island covers itself in glory in state policy on these matters, but it's not like these are things that don't happen in other places. And it's not clear that transit is really the cause. So it seems to me that what we're planning to do, or what the proposal would do, is banish buses from Kennedy Plaza on the basis of a hypothesis that doesn't seem to me to have a great deal of support for it. So we're going to spend a lot of money, make the bus service less convenient for people, chase a lot of people off of the buses who would or should be able to ride it, and not even be guaranteed that it's going to work.
Right.
On the terms, if you accept it as on the terms that that Joe Paolino would have you judge it, it's not at all clear that this would be successful. And I think that those terms are silly, are throwing out babies with bathwater, are short-sighted, and I mean, Joe Paolino has buildings to rent, but he also has buildings whose foundations sit below sea level. I mean, he should be as concerned about ameliorating the effects of carbon pollution as anybody. And I mean, he's got a lot of money invested in below sea level real estate. So, like, how exactly is making the bus service worse going to help?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the smoking ban. I think it's a lot fairly anecdotal. Avedisian told me earlier this year that there's a notion that people who are, that are staying at whether it's Crossroads or whatever other facility, maybe they're at the Mathewson Street Church having a breakfast, whatever it is, there's a large volume of people who make their way to Kennedy Plaza and then use the bus. And again, this is what Avedisian told me. They'll get on the bus, ride to Newport or Wakefield, one to be either heated or air conditioned, and then when they arrive in Newport or Wakefield, there's different centers where they can get a meal and so on and so forth. So it creates a dynamic for a large group of people that they're riding around the state, climate controlled operation, and it gives something, sort of a point, a starting point, an ending point to their day. Now, how do you prove that? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to be putting investigators out there and really following individuals as they get on the bus. Otherwise,
maybe that's true, but that doesn't. Here's the thing: Burnside Park is a perfectly pleasant place to hang out.
Yep.
So,
why wouldn't people want to hang out there, right?
Even if you had to walk 2 blocks or 6 blocks over from the, they want to make buses end at the Garrahy Center, the court, the family court, because somehow those are the people who ride the bus. I mean, those are, I'm sure there are people who ride the bus who wind up in family court, but there are also people who ride the bus every day who work at Banks and who work at Brown, who work at RISD, these are people that I ride the bus with. And to think of bus riders as dominated by people whose destination is family court is kind of insulting. And in my experience, it's not at all true. I mean, I sit on the bus, I see them. There are people there. I mean, there's people there who are DUI. Who are suffering from some DUI. You see them for 30 days or 60 days or whatever their license suspension was, and then you don't see them again. But sure, I mean, yeah, they're bus riders, but so are all these other people bus riders, and they deserve some consideration. And making the system convenient for them would be a good thing for everybody.
Yeah, it's the chicken or egg question, I guess. But you would think that if the bus was at a baseline of functionality, cleanliness, and again, I don't want to sit here and rip RIPTA because, frankly, I don't even remember the last time I was on a RIPTA bus, to be honest with you. So I can't even, maybe years ago.
Listen, I can tell you that the experience of riding the bus is fine, right? The buses are clean. I've never had a problem on the bus. I mean, there's things that I've seen that amuse me on the bus.
Of course, right.
I mean, I watched a guy once trying to pick up women by showing them his ankle bracelet. The monitoring bracelet.
Gotcha. Yep.
Right. And like, all right. I mean, it's a strategy that hadn't occurred to me before, and if I ever find myself with an ankle bracelet, maybe I'll,
that's the move, right there.
Maybe I'll give that a try. But it, you get little glimpses of other people's lives that you might not get, locked away in your car. But I can't recall ever feeling threatened or uncomfortable by what I was seeing or hearing on the bus. All right, uncomfortable. Yeah, I do remember a couple in the back of the bus who were making other riders a little bit uncomfortable
Gotcha.
But you just wanted them to go get a room or something like that. Right. They felt comfortable.
I feel like the people who, again, I haven't been on, I actually can remember being on I would take it from Newport to URI, and I guess this would be like 16, maybe 2017. I was on that. I did do that line several times.
64?
Yes, with my bike on the front of it. That was something I had done. So that's the last time I'd been on. Not in Providence, though. But I sensed that someone who would say, oh, RIPTA is dirty, it's dangerous, and as a rule of thumb is also the same person who would say, oh, I don't go to the Providence Play Small because it's dangerous. You know, it's just that sort of...
There is this funny thing that happens when, when I tell people that I ride the bus, I work at Brown, and I was telling somebody recently asked me where I parked, and I said, oh, I don't park, I just take the bus. And she immediately started telling me about all the reasons that she couldn't take the bus, and I thought, well, did I ask?
Right.
I didn't mean this about you. I just take the bus because it's easy, and because that way I don't have to park and worry about a car, and because it's less expensive, and it's. I mean, in truth, you can manage to set your life up so that it is quite easy, and that when there's traffic in the morning, I don't care. I'm reading.
Right.
It just doesn't. The bus is a great convenience, and the thing that I object to is taking what is for me a great convenience and making it less convenient, for the sake of a misbegotten conception of what exactly the problem is in downtown Providence. I mean, the problem in downtown Providence, it seems to me, is that so many of the businesses and the government that used to be there is now not there. So, the state has moved all these offices out to Warwick, where you can't get to by public transit. Banks that used to be downtown are no longer there. So the great mass of commuters that used to be there and masked the poor people who were
kind of under there, so to speak.
Who were there
right.
at the same time. That great mass of commuters is no longer there, and as a result, the other people who've been there all along are more obvious. But I think that's really the problem. But there's issues for that too. The state has control over that kind of thing. We don't have to move offices out into the burbs. We don't have to subsidize Citizens Bank when it decides to build its headquarters in Johnston. We don't have to subsidize anybody else who decides to move to East Greenwich or to North Kingstown. I mean, these are matters of state policy that would be relatively easy to correct. And not only don't we correct them, we don't even think about them.
Right. Yeah, they're not on the when you talk about attracting companies to Providence or to Rhode Island in general, I don't think, when people think of transportation, they're probably thinking, all right, rail, is that reliable? The airport runway, is that long enough? Are there enough flights for us to actually have a corporate headquarters here or whatever it may be? Yeah, I mean, you think about the Wexford building. I mean, is there a bus stop outside of that? I mean, do they think the people who are moving into the new CIC center would be motivated to take a bus from wherever they live? I don't know.
Well, I mean, to their credit, RIPTA did establish a new line to service that. There's a 62 bus.
That, there is. Okay.
Great. That serves that from South County, but
gotcha.
And I think they moved a couple of routes around, but it's but I think you're completely right that it's an afterthought. I worked for a little while in at a company in downtown Boston, and they were right next to South Station, and they were really happy about being right next to South Station. It was, and everybody else was really happy about that too. They're still there. That was 20 something years ago. They're still there. They're happy to be there. They are thriving, and when you talk to people about businesses in downtown Boston, they say, yeah, that's cool. I can take the train there. A friend of mine was working at a company in downtown, and the company she was working at Amazon, and they moved to Medford, and she's furious because now her commute is twice as long and much harder to much harder to service by the transit that's there. I mean, in Boston, the transit is an important part of people's choice to locate businesses there. That's
Absolutely.
That's
and
the
you
way it
would think
works.
it could be an attractive element of Rhode Island as well.
Yeah.
That it could be designed as part of that incentive. Hey, you're opening up a company or you're moving a company here. You've got space in Olneyville. And I know they got the little roadie self-driving car going down Olneyville Square to the train station. But in other words, you got your space in Olneyville. We can get your people to and fro the train station, to and fro Kennedy Plaza or whatever the hub is, and ultimately their house into the airport in a rapid time. That's something that Rhode Island could offer.
Yeah, exactly. But we can only offer it if we actually make a choice to do that. And instead, what we do is we don't choose that. We don't even really think about it, and we allow RIPTA to sort of decay and become so much less than what it could be. But I mean, the sort of impending climate crisis, it seems to me, gives us a chance to actually make those choices. I mean, this is one of the beauties of the idea of a Green New Deal, right? Is look, here's a crisis, let's deal with it. But look, let us take the opportunity as we deal with it to do it in a thoughtful way, where we are actually investing in what is important to the community. And out of this, we can make this not only a cleaner place, but we can also make it a better, more prosperous, richer place by being careful about where we put the money and actually investing in places where it'll do the most good.
Fascinating stuff. Last minute or so here, just want to touch on real quick how this all ties into bikes. And there's the ability you can put your bike on the front. Two people, I guess, can put their bikes on the front of a RIPTA bus.
Yeah.
I find Providence to be not a particularly bike appealing place.
There's this big hill.
Exactly, you got that too. Yeah, there's that. That's a little factor. But just being realistic about Elmwood Avenue and where I'm at right now, some of the roads I wouldn't feel safe riding my bike. And when I do ride, I'm on the sidewalk. Same with my wife. I've ridden in Manhattan, Newport, Boston, you name it.
I know what you mean.
But so how can we improve that and then integrate that into the bus system, other than the incompetency that we saw with this bike line installation over the last few weeks?
No, I know what you mean. Actually, this morning coming here, I took my bike on the bus, and it is funny. I mean, the bike racks are well used in my observation. I mean, the risk of taking the bike on the bus is that there are only two spots, and that sometimes they're full. There's in Kennedy Plaza, a lot of times there's sort of jockeying for position. Like if you've got a bike, you sort of get to the bus stop early and put your bike there.
Dominate the line somehow or whatever.
Yeah,
it is,
because if you don't sort of stake it out, then there's going to be two more bikes come up before you, and then you're kind of stuck. And the problem is that the service is not frequent enough that just taking the next bus it becomes a significant inconvenience if you have to wait an hour for the next bus because you didn't sort of stake out your territory. But I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which the city could create infrastructure to make biking safer. I wonder though if part of what's going on is is the sort of increasing unfamiliarity of drivers with bicycles on the roads, and that it becomes, as you were saying before, kind of a different kind of a chicken and egg thing. Yeah. How do you get more bicycles on the road if the roads are widely perceived as unsafe, and you have drivers who don't really understand what to do or when not to open their door.
Yeah, getting doored is not, it's not out of the question on any Providence street, but I guess any street anywhere. But here it seems.
I mean, riding alongside parked cars is, taking your life in your hands. I do think that there are definitely ways that this could be done better. I mean, one of the problems that we have is that the mayor actually is a pretty good advocate, I think, for bicycle infrastructure. Sure. But he is sort of out there by himself, several steps beyond where the city council is, and he has to deal with the screaming that happens. So wasn't there? There was just some bicycle infrastructure taken down.
Yeah, exactly. And I heard Councilman Salvatore on the radio this morning saying, I would ride my bike if I could, but we're a car-centric state. We're a car-centric city, so that mentality's there.
And that is such a self-fulfilling kind of a thing. I mean, yeah, of course. So we're car-centric, and what are you going to do to change that? Oh, well, nothing, actually. In fact, not only am I not going to do anything about it, I'm going to say that the reason I'm not going to do anything about it is because I'm not going to do anything about it. Like,
right.
Like, what are you talking about? Grow a spine, man. And I mean, if you think that bicycling would be a good thing to encourage in even the smallest, most insignificant way, I mean, for heaven's sake, what do you think?
Do it.
Do it, right? Just say, do it. And when the people scream at you about losing an extra lane of traffic, just say, why do you think it's your God-given right to drive 40 miles an hour on a city street? I mean, drive 25. That's what the speed limit is. Right. And relax. Leave 2 minutes earlier.
Right, and that's the thing. The total commute time is going to increase by 2 to 3 minutes in those types of situations for a motorist. So it's...
I mean, my heart bleeds.
As always, thanks so much for spending time on the Bartholomew Town podcast. I'll be back with a brand new episode on Tuesday, and there's almost 150 episodes on your favorite podcast app, ripodcast.com or bartholomewtown.com. Until next time, I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.